Hello, my name is Dennis Brothers, Associate Extension Professor with Auburn University's Agricultural Economics and Rural Sociology Department. Pleased to present to you Broiler Buddy, the Commercial Poultry Financial Decision Tool. This financial calculator tool is a joint effort of myself, Dr. Adam Kantrovich of Clemson University, with assistance of Dr. Jada Thompson of the University of Arkansas. This tool is brought to you by the Alabama Cooperative Extension System through a grant from the Southern Extension Risk Management Center with the financial support of the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture.
Hello, I'm Adam Kantrovich with Clemson University Cooperative Extension. If you're considering a new commercial broiler farm or are a current commercial broiler grower, we hope this tool will offer you some help with financial and risk management decisions on the farm. This tool is not perfect, nor is it to be looked at as a firm predictor of business outcomes or profit. But we think it can help growers make go or no-go type decisions, as well as offer the opportunity to compare and contrast between various options that may impact your bottom line.
The tool can be accessed by going to www.aces.edu/go/broilerbuddy. You can see here the first opening page of the tool looks like. So let's go there now and let's look at some of the basic information and introductory instructions about the tool. The Commercial Poultry Financial Management Calculator is designed to help existing and prospective growers make risk management and financial investment decisions on their farms. Tool's dual scenario comparison format allows growers to evaluate the payback of various upgrade and maintenance investments and farm income impacts from production or operational cost changes.
Basically, the tool is set up so that a side-by-side comparison of multiple variables that may occur on a broiler farm can be viewed. Since many of these variables are not fully under the control of the grower, the calculator can model these various outcomes so that a grower can see the potential changes in multiple areas that may impact the net return, both in the short and in the long term, and quickly compare these competing outcomes.
That's right, Adam. And new and prospective growers can evaluate the effects of things like housing cost, interest rates, loan formats, anything that changes farm income. They can model differing contract terms as well as impacts of production or cost changes. The tool calculates these impacts, like you said, both on long and short-term cash flows, and those can even be user-defined to some extent. But we must remember, the results of these calculations are estimates and strictly a function of the data you put into the tool. Faulty data input will result in faulty results. Users must be careful to input reasonable and representative input data. That's the only way they're ensured of a reasonable result. However, even with the most exact data, the results are estimates and are not intended to be used of any kind of guarantee of return in a commercial poultry business.
There are also some key assumptions that we made that users need to be aware of that may affect the results. First and most important assumption is that bird production numbers and pay per pound is constant for every flock every year. We know this is often not the case in the real world, but like any prediction model, these assumptions are needed to make the model usable. However, using the calculator side-by-side comparison function, a user may model ranges, and we will talk about that a little bit more later on. The cost of production for varying house ages and types were also gathered from active farms. We'll have more on how this works later as well. The third assumption are that loans are all simple, fixed interest loans without balloon payments, and payments are annualized as a single yearly expense. Depreciation is calculated as straight line, and only 7 or 10-year options are available for new loans. And fourth, this version of Broiler Buddy is designed for a Southeast U.S. application. If using the tool to model in other areas of the U.S., your results may not reflect the impact of your weather patterns on variable costs or house efficiencies.
So Now that we have a general idea of what the calculator might do for us, I think one of the best things we can do to better understand how to use it is simply work through a few example models and discuss the results. We'll click start and we'll get started. But just remember, like the old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. First thing we do when we click start is users must first decide how they're going to interact with the tool. They can choose either having existing houses and they're looking to evaluate upgrade or maintenance investments, for example, or they can choose if they are a new farmer, a prospective farmer, and maybe they're looking to evaluate building a new farm or buying an existing farm. These are the two basic ways you interact with the tool, and that's the first choice we must make. For this video, we're going to step you through a new farmer scenario where a guy is looking to build a new farm and looking at the possible changes that could happen, comparing building a farm and buying a farm. So we click on that section. It takes us straight to the first input page, which is our housing input page. In our example model we look at today, we will input what we expect to build into scenario 1, call that status quo. And we can also compare a different house or farm size in scenario 2. For this example, let's look at building 4 houses and then buy an existing farm that has 6 houses. This is just one way to approach this calculator. But what we do is input scenario 1. We're going to look at building a farm with 54-foot wide by 500-foot houses. And we're going to look at building 4 of those. In scenario 2, we're going to look at buying a farm with 54 by 500-foot houses, but that farm has 6 houses. And we see the resulting square foot of both of those farm choices. Next, we see the cost of the farms in square foot. And since we're building a farm, we're going to input square foot numbers for structure, equipment, and all other costs. You may need to do some math here if you have completed bids already, or if you know the square foot estimates, you can put those directly here if you got them from builders or integrators. For new construction, we'll use some average numbers for today. For structure, we'll say our new farm we're going to build costs us $10 per square foot for the structure, $10 per square foot for our equipment, and $4 per square foot for our other costs. And other costs in this case would be the pads, or gravel for driveway, utility hookup charges, all those things that are not specifically structures or equipment. It gives us a total of $24 per square foot to have the farm ready to get birds. Over on scenario 2, let's assume we're purchasing this 6-house farm for $2 million. We scroll down where it says farm purchase cost, $2 million. Seems like a good deal, right? Purchase this farm for $2 million. But since it is an existing farm, we're going to have to spend some money. We're going to have to upgrade this farm a little bit, spend some money to get it up to par. That's going to cost us another $500,000. So here's our 2 scenarios. Build farm 1, scenario 1, by building 4 new 54 by 500s at this cost, or buy farm 2, scenario 2, with 6 54 500s for $2 million and also invest an additional $500,000 for upgrades and maintenance. And we go to our next section.
Behind the scenes, the loan calculator portion of the tool takes equity or cash into the loan into account, as well as loan fees, construction loan interest if applicable, and will adjust the final loan accordingly. When using the farm purchase option, the tool does not calculate construction loan interest. So we must take that into account and may need to apply that in a different way. Now, let's click Next, and we go to the loan section where we're presently at. For the new farm option, we have one loan option available. since we are modeling two sizes of farms, we're going to leave the basic loan information the same for both scenarios. We can look at changes for these later, but for now, let's assume a 15-year term at 7% interest, and we're going to have a 10-year depreciation for this model. When we get to the equity that's required for these particular loans, depending on the financial institution you are working with, you may be required to have a certain amount of equity built into what you are purchasing, either through taking into consideration what you may be putting down, or if there's anything else that's left based on the value that you're paying for those homes. And so in this particular scenario, we are going to require, or the loan is going to require a 10% equity stake within that. And so therefore, we will put down 10% in both of these options. If we have cash that we are putting down, we would place that under the cash input. And we need to make sure that we have depreciable life also set in both scenarios at 10 in this particular case. And we hit next.
Now we look at the production numbers for our houses. This includes our house age and class. For this question, the user must understand what they are about to choose, and it's very important as it is very important how the tool calculates production cost. Carefully read the descriptions of each housing class for this option. It's not necessary that your house exactly match these, but choose the closest one that best describes your house equipment and structure. For our example, in scenario 1, we're building new. So it's obvious our house is going to be 0 to 5 years old and class A, the best possible class. For scenario 2, since we're purchasing a farm, that may be different. We'll look at that shortly. As we scroll down and look at bird production, we suggest you input numbers here that reflect what you expect on the farm you're going to build, either information you've gotten from an integrator or from information that you've gathered from surrounding growers, but put in valuable, accurate information as possible. We're going to assume in our example, we're raising a 6.5 pound bird target weight with a stocking density of 0.8 square foot per bird. Our mortality rate is going to be 6%, and our flock length is an average of 45 days. And company out time is set right now for 18 days between flocks. And now we get to pay rate. Pause here a minute to talk about pay rate. There's numerous ways to look at pay rate. Since we're building new in scenario 1, we could simply input the contract base or average pay rate. New house incentives will be handled later. Let's say that the average pay rate on this company for new house is 0.065 cents per pound. If you want to evaluate a worst case scenario in a competitive pay situation, you may want to put a lower number here to represent a farm being a low performing farm, or a higher number for a higher performing farm. Lots of ways you can evaluate this. And for litter, if you're going to sell litter off farm and get cash input, you could put a value here, or you could input a assumed fertilizer value here, or you could simply leave it blank. For our new farm, we're going to assume we sell litter for $2,000 a year. Now let's look at scenario 2. As we talked about, we're buying a existing farm. So we're going to assume that existing farm is 6 to 15 years old. And we're going to spend that $500,000 to get it up to Class A specifications. That's why we're upgrading. So we choose that. And then that takes into consideration the efficiencies of such a house. Go down to bird weight, it's going to be the same. Our stocking density is going to be the same. We're going to have the same numbers across the board because we're comparing houses that are very similar. And what the difference is, on litter, we've got more houses. So instead of selling $2,000 per year, we're going to sell $3,000 per year of litter. Now we could make some changes in production if we wanted to, but for right now, for our model, we're going to assume the same production for both of our farms. We hit next and go to our next section.
And here we begin to discuss and take a look at bonuses and utilities. So we have energy and or heating fuel bonuses that may be modeled if your contract has those. You can model a year-round energy bonus per pound, per square foot, or you can model a seasonal bonus per pound for a specified number of flocks per year. Alternately, you can input a lump sum for any energy and or fuel bonus if you don't know the other two variables, or if that is how you receive such a payment. We're going to use a half a cent per pound for 2 flocks out of the year for both of our scenarios.
Now we go to the next section of new house bonus or new farm incentives. There are 3 choices: per pound with an accompanying number of years, per square foot with the accompanying number of years, or a cash incentive upfront 1099 loan with a scheduled payout over a certain number of years. The per pound and the per square foot are pretty straightforward. If your contract offers so much per pound for so many years or so much per square foot for so many years, simply input those numbers here. However, the cash incentive is a little more complicated. This is typically a square foot number that is calculated and applied to the principal of the loan up front, lowering the loan amount and the subsequent payment. However, this is typically attributed to the grower's cash flow as loan forgiveness over time. That annual amount, while not in cash for the grower, is considered normal income as in accounted for as taxable income for our model. For our new build, we're going to assume $11 per square foot cash incentive that is paid back or forgiven to the grower over a 10-year period. For our purchase farm, it's already 10 years old, and it does not qualify for new house incentives. Once again, lots of ways you can look at comparing these farms.
And next we come up to utilities. All a user needs to input information here are the prices of the utilities on a per unit basis. The tool will use the input and background data for housing and production to be able to calculate the energy usage for each of the scenarios separately. For our example, we're going to be paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity and $1.50 per therm for natural gas. It must be noted here that you should only choose one or the other between LP or natural gas. However, if you are making a decision on what energy usage to consider between options, you may be able to utilize LP in, for example, in scenario 1 and natural gas in scenario 2. This will give you a cost comparison between the two. For water, if you have a well, you can leave this at 0. If you purchase municipal water, input the cost here. We're going to use a value of $4 per 1,000 gallons, assuming we're going to be purchasing the water from a local municipality.
Now we look at labor on the farm. There are a lot of ways to approach the labor question. The simplest way is to leave this all blank. That way, we know from the bottom line number in our results later how much money we have to pay all our labor, including our own. However, you could also input values here to simulate paying yourself, or paying an outside manager, or paying casual labor. That could result in a better prediction of net farm income from the tool, but the choice is yours. For our example, we will input some casual labor and model hiring part-time workers to help during the year. Let's say we hire 1,000 hours worth of casual labor for scenario 1, and for scenario 2, 1,500 hours because it's a bigger farm. And we pay those laborers $15 an hour. No benefits are calculated for casual labor. Benefits are calculated for annual hired management or annual full-time hired labor. Now, in the leftover results, we know the money we have left is what we're going to have to pay any hired management or any hired labor with. Insurance comes next. Every farm must have insurance. You have two options here. You can allow the tool to calculate insurance costs for you. It does so based on age and class by square foot, or you can input a lump sum of insurance that represents an annual cost for the farm, if you know that. Some have noted that there are higher areas of insurance in the nation that the tool calculates a little bit too low. So that may be the case. If you know you're in a high insurance area, then we suggest you input your own insurance rate annual cost here. For our model, we're going to let the tool calculate our insurance rates.
As we all know, the tax man has to be paid. So next, we're going to discuss taxes. This step can be as simple or as complex as you would like. You may simply input an estimated effective tax rate here to include all taxes as a percentage of net revenue. And this would include your state, federal, self-employment tax, etc. However, if you'd like to get more detailed, you may do so by going to the ruraltax.org tax estimator tool that we have. And you can see that link there in the narrative just above where you enter your tax information. You may go through that tax calculator that will give you a close estimate of what your effective tax rate would be given a whole host of considerations. But it is your choice. Either way, the user must input a number here if you want to model taxes in your results. It is strongly encouraged that you do so because this directly affects your cash flow, which will be shown in those end results. We are going to assume we went to the rural tax and it told us that our tax rate was going to be at 32% of net revenue. That's state and federal combined. So we'll input this for both of our scenarios. Next, we can model expense escalation over time. It should be noted here that the tool will calculate a long-term cash flow of 25 years automatically. So to see the increase in input costs and the loss of the efficiencies over time reflected in our model, we would have to put a percentage escalation value here. If you are only interested in year one results, that may not be necessary. But if you want a real world result over the long term, we need to place some type of escalation percentage that is reasonable. The higher the number, the bigger the cost increases, and because of the loss of efficiency which is being assumed. For our example, we're going to use a 0.5% per year. This is a conservative but reasonable figure in our opinion. The last option here is a specific period of time that you would want to evaluate for cash flow. If we want to evaluate anything less than the 25 years. Since we took out a 15-year loan, for both of these scenarios, we want to look at what our net return at 15 years looks like, specifically between our two scenarios. This may make more sense when we actually see our results here in a little bit.
Finally, we get to the fun part. Now it's time to calculate our results. But first, I want you to know that before calculating results, if you want to go back and change any of these sections or any of the information in any of these sections, or you can go back and we suggest you check and make sure you got the numbers where you want them, everything matches what you want, you can do that before calculating results. So let's calculate. What do we see? What do we see? Well, the first thing that pops up here is a result summary of our calculations of our model. We notice some things. We notice a change in bird revenue. Well, we got more houses in scenario 2, so that makes sense. We also notice a larger loan. Why did that happen? We got more houses, and our interest paid is higher. Our annual loan payment is higher for scenario 2. So even though we've got more bird revenue, we're spending more money. We have operations cost higher in scenario 2. Well, we got more houses. That makes sense. But our percentage of operation costs compared to bird revenue is also a little bit higher. This is a reflection of the efficiency loss of those older houses. And then we look at our year 1 net return after taxes. We're making a little bit more in scenario 1, even though we have more houses in scenario 2. What we see in this bottom line is this is the amount of money we have to pay all of our other expenses like home mortgage and groceries, health insurance, etc., as well as any labor, because we did not consider owner labor or farm labor in our labor calculations. So this is what we have left to pay all of that.
So let's evaluate these results a bit further. In the early years, we make less with the purchased farm, mainly due to its larger loan payment. But after the loan is paid, we make significantly more. However, the loan is not as attractive to the bank because of the low debt ratio, the ability to pay the loan with net revenue. Even though in the long term our purchase option is better, we may struggle to secure that loan to be able to purchase that particular scenario. One way to overcome this might be by inserting some cash or additional cash into the purchase to offer more equity to the bank in the form of collateral. We may also be able to shop around for better rates. We will evaluate these variables with the tool later. Once again, this is just one example and only applies to the numbers that we have placed inside these scenarios. If we scroll down a little, we can see the graphical example of our models. We can see how the cost escalation is decreasing our returns. But we can also see in scenario 2 graph what happens when our loan gets paid off. We get a huge bump in net revenue. If we click on detailed results, we can see all the inputs, all the cost calculation results, as well as the year-by-year cash flow tables. So let's take a look at those quickly.
First, we see our chosen fixed time period of 15 years. We see a cash flow table represented to that. We can scroll and we can look at each individual year and see how things change over time. Then we scroll down and we see our 25-year cash flow. And both of these were for scenario 1. We scroll out 25 years. You can see what happens. And we see the same thing for scenario 2. Our chosen period, 15 years and 25 years. And you can scroll further. You have the loan information for each scenario put out specifically with the individual payment schedules for each loan, as well as we scroll back up past our cash flows. We have our expense budgets for each scenario, utilities, bird performance, production numbers, our farm purchase cost loan data, our farm existing farm, and then we have our build new house data, what the loan is for there per square foot. So a lot of information to look at at these summary tables that go beyond the summary tables. Another option, once you've gone through your results and seen the summary, maybe looked at the details, if you want to print a paper copy of the quick results, the summary table, and the graph, go up to the print option at the top of the page, and you should get the opportunity to print those results as well as your graphical pages, as we see here. You cannot print the detailed results, but you can print the summary results. So this gives you the opportunity to compare several scenarios and go forward and compare different scenarios, and you can go back and look at what your results were in the past. Now we'll look at changing some inputs.
The coolest thing I like about this tool is the ability to be able to make incremental changes and be able to see those results relatively quickly. So let's go back to the beginning by clicking on loans, and let's see what happens to the purchase option if we were to inject an additional $150,000 in cash to be able to get a better interest rate. And let's use a 6.5% interest rate. So we make our changes, we click next, let's click on results and click calculate, and let's see what happens. So we've knocked the loan payment down, and now our debt service ratio also improves, maybe even enough to be able to get the loan.
Let's look at another option. What if that was not an option and we had to look at different ways to get what we needed for this purchase farm? What if I want to look at a change in production? How can we do that? If I want to isolate a single input, well, I'll go back and I'll make all my past changes, take them back to where we were to start with, make one change in production and see what happens. For example, let's look at differences in natural gas and propane. Assume this new farm does not have natural gas access, but the purchase farm does. Can we look at that difference? Certainly we can. Go back to where we were, go back to our utilities, and we say, well, our new farm has natural gas, but the old farm is on LP. And that LP price is $2 a gallon. $2 a gallon. Our purchase farm has natural gas at $1.50. What happens? Back to our results. Calculate. See an increase in cost. And we see our difference has gone up by about $11,000. So that tells us that propane, building a farm with propane, in this scenario, would have been $11,000 less profitable than building a new farm with natural gas. And our existing farm with natural gas is still a better choice, although it still has this poor debt ratio.
Another thing that we could look at is a change in production, such as bird size or bird density within our houses. So let's say in our purchase farm, with a different company, and they grow a different bird. So we want to be able to take advantage of this tool and be able to show that particular option. To do this, we do the same thing that we had done in the past, except we go to our production page and we make changes to that production. So let's say the farm goes from a 6.5-pound bird to a 9-pound bird. And we also need to make the changes to all of the other aspects that go along with that. So on the production page, we're going to modify that scenario to read the change in weight to 9 pound. The density is going to be a 1. Flock length is going to be at 63. And the mortality we're going to change and increase to 8%. Our pay, though, is going to be a little bit higher at 7 cents. We're going to maintain the out time, and let's take a look to see what happens. So we click next, we go to results, we click calculate, and in this case, what happens? The change actually cost us money in net return. Overall, it's much lower, even with the heavier birds. What could overcome that? Well, possibly a higher pay rate. So let's look at this again, changing scenario 2, and let's up the pay rate by an additional ½ cent a pound. And now we can see the difference. It's back. We are back to a better cash flow aspect, right? Our average net gain is actually in the positives versus in the negatives. So we can see this difference. It's back to that short-term problems with scenario 2, but long-term better returns. Hopefully we can see, or you can see, how you might be able to use this tool to evaluate a variety of options in a multitude of ways.
That's correct. There are endless number of scenarios we can look at and examine the results. Hopefully this could help you decide if an investment in new poultry houses makes sense for you. Or maybe you want to model production changes or loan rates, etc., input values, all kind of things you can look at to plan a future farm. We hope this tool helps you find a way to make better financial decisions on your farm or the farm you're considering building or buying. As you have run your scenarios through the tool, we hope you found a valuable way to use the tool. If you don't mind, if you have a smart device, please take our evaluation survey. Click the QR code and you will be taken to a short 4-question evaluation, and we would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you for watching. This has been a production of the Alabama Cooperative Extension System with support from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture through a grant from the Southern Risk Management Education Center. If you have any questions or have any problems, please email me at brothers@auburn.edu.
Or if you have any tax questions, you may reach me at akantro@clemson.edu.
Thank you for your time.